Good afternoon and good evening to India. I am Bettina Janssen, Program Executive of the Friedrich Naumann Stiftung Foundation for Freedom here in Hamburg. It is my honor to co-host this event on women startups on the premises of the Consulate General of India in Hamburg. Thank you for having us here. And thank you to our partners, it's a long word, OAV, German Asia Pacific Business Association, and GINSEP, German Indian Startup Exchange Program. So I hope I got it right. The event can be followed online on our Zoom account as well. So welcome to everyone, those participating here in this room and those participating on the digital option. The aim of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation as a political foundation is to provide civic education, to enable encounters and international political dialogues, and to promote the ideas of liberalism in Germany and in more than 60 countries all over the world, such as India. And one of the key principles of liberalism is the idea that every individual should be given the chance to pursue their personal goals and be free to express their talents to one's own good and to the good of society. Women make for half of the world's population, but still, in terms of founding and running businesses, it's a men's world. What can be done about this? And how can the potentials of the female half be unearthed? This is the question today. We can listen and learn from successful women from Germany and from India today, and I wish you a wonderful and fruitful discussion. But before, I would like to pass on the word to the Consul General of India. The stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very good evening and welcome to the Consulate General of India in Hamburg. And this important discussion on women startups, breaking the glass ceiling. First of all, I must thank the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom, the OAV, the German Asia Pacific Business Association, and GINSEP, German Indian Startup Exchange Program, for organizing this important discussion today and for giving me this opportunity to say a few words of welcome. I understand that the issue on the table that we will be discussing today here is why the startup scene is still a gentleman's club and women are still in a minority. Why there is a gender bias in funding, why it is more difficult for women to gain a foothold on the startup scene, despite both male and female founders having more or less the same level of education, business, technical and digital knowledge, and also the drive to succeed, which is equal both among men and women. What are the challenges that female startup founders face, and how can the situation be improved? I'm not an expert on any of these things or on the subject, but I look forward to learning from the distinguished panels and the speakers who will be in this program today. One of India's key strengths is that it's our demography, with more than 50% of its population under the age of 25 and more than 65% below the age of 35. By 2020, next year, the median age of an Indian will be 28 years, which is, you can compare this with 37 in China, 48 for Japan, and 45 in Germany and Europe. In the coming decades, India will have the largest working age population of over 1 billion people. This demographic dividend, when combined with an increasingly educated population, has the potential to transform India's economic and social development. And this is where startups and entrepreneurs have a vital role to play in generating employment and jobs. According to one report, India has up to 15 million women-owned enterprises, which represents 20% of all enterprises in the country. But this is an increase from 14% a decade back. And according to a recent study, businesses owned by women in India are likely to witness a 90% growth in the coming 5 years, compared to 50% in the US and 24% in the UK. So in India, the successful women entrepreneurs like Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, who is founder of Biocon, Jyoti Naik, ex-president of Lijjat Papad, Priya Paul, chairperson of Park Hotels, or Vandana Luthra, head of VLCC beauty chain, and several others who carry out their business ventures quietly are breaking the centuries of conventions in India, and they have gained fame for themselves in the Indian business world. The government of India has also taken a large number of policy initiatives for mainstreaming women and to provide them a level playing field so that they can join in the country's economic growth. In February 2016, Startup India program was launched by the government of India. And over the period, it has become the third largest startup ecosystem in the world, providing hand-holding, funding support, incentives, industry, academic partnership, and to provide conducive environment for startups in the country. A fund of Indian rupees 10,000 crores, which is about 100 billion or approximately 1.1 billion euro, has been earmarked for the program to build a strong ecosystem for nurturing innovation and startups. And 10% of this fund was reserved for women-led startups in India. The year 2021 has been a record-breaking year for Indian startups so far, with new age companies hitting the public market, cracking the biggest funding deals, and more companies being valued at over $1 billion. According to a business intelligence firm, Indian startups have raised $23 billion in 2021, till 1st of September this year. This is significantly higher than 13 billion US dollars, which was raised by the ecosystem in 2020 last year. The new estimates show that 150 startups will be valued at over $1 billion in the next 4 years in India. And by 2025, including at least 15 of these companies would be women-led startups. India already has several successful startups founded and led by women, such as one called My Dala. This is the largest coupon and discount platform in India, founded in 2009 by Anisha Singh, which has grown to handling around 200,000 transactions every day and is targeting about 400 million customers in over 200 cities in India. So while the pandemic has affected everybody worldwide, I think it has probably affected the female workers and startup founders more than the other sex. Not only did they need to manage how the prolonged uncertainty would affect their work and businesses, but they also had to find a way to do it while working from home and caring for, feeding and homeschooling their children. Because women are more likely to become caretakers than the men, and especially in a family suffering from COVID. So they have had to manage full-time jobs, most of them unpaid. And I just read a report a few days back, which said that women have lost millions of jobs during the pandemic. And at least a generation of women and female founders were lost from the workforce. With women's market participation rate the same as it was in the 1980s, progress has not only stalled, but reverted back, you can say, 40 years. Thus, there is a need to come out stronger to support women in the workplaces and in launching their startups and businesses. There is a need to these statistics by committing to creating better work environments for women and ensuring that women leaders rise to the top. It is up to the women also to take calculated risks, aim for progress, and have the confidence, in your own competence to continue and to dream big. So with these words, I welcome participants both from Germany and from India, those who are online here with us this evening, and also those who are present offline here with us physically. And the consulate is very happy and privileged to be able to provide a platform for important conferences such as this as part of the 9th India Week Hamburg. And I wish you all a fruitful and interesting discussion this evening. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Also, welcome from my side to everyone who has joined online, but also here in person, offline. Great to see you. My name is Julian. I'm the project lead of GINSEP, the German-Indian Startup Exchange program, which I'm leading since a good 3 years. Before that, I was working in India in various roles. And I'm really excited about today's session, which is also big thank you to the Friedrich Naumann Foundation, first of all, for organizing this, mainly for asking GINSEP to support, but also the OAV, as it was mentioned earlier. Now a little bit maybe about GINSEP, a few words. The German-Indian Startup Exchange program is also almost 4 years old now, and it's a platform funded by the Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Energy, by the German Federal Ministry in Berlin, to facilitate businesses between Germany and India. And businesses are restricted or focused particularly on startups. So German startups on the way to India, Indian startups on the way to Germany, and provide a platform for the startups to meet each other, for the startups to meet corporates, for the startups to meet investors or other enablers, as we like to call them. And as I said, the project is around 4 years old, and we started from scratch to bring together all these different players. And initially, as it always is, you have a really nice concept, you have really nice ideas of how you want to do it, and then you start working, and then you really see what is out there, what are the challenges, what are the topics really that the startups discuss, what are the different fields, what are the sectors that they're usually in. Because, well, many things you read in some reports, you hear some numbers of course, great success stories. And I'm not saying this is not good, but we really want to hear from the entrepreneurs, from the startups themselves, what these challenges are. And this is why I think an event like today is really important to really give these individual entrepreneurs, the female entrepreneurs in today's topic, really also a platform and a stage, so to hear it from them really first hand what the topic is about and what these challenges are. I would like to very briefly introduce the 3 panelists before we also ask, of course, them to share their story, and then I'll ask them, of course, several questions first about, of course, their story, about their experiences. One by one, I will go through it. And then, of course, I would like to ask them about the support mechanisms that are out there in both Germany and India. So to also get an idea of simply compare what works and what does not work or works less well in both the country, and possibly also what we can learn from each other. And then the final part, we'll talk about some recommendations to founders, to enablers, to organizations, maybe to investors as well, that make things easier. Because one thing is very, very clear, that the situation at this point doesn't look really, really well. For this panel, we have around 45 to 60 minutes, and then we'll have some Q&A, some questions and answers. And for everyone here who wants to ask a question, we'll have at the very end that opportunity. So then please raise your hand. To everyone who's joined online via Zoom, you can use the Q&A section there. So the chat is disabled, so please make use of the Q&A section to post your question there, and we'll take it up later in the Q&A at the very end of the session. So Now, quickly to the three panelists that we have with us. So female entrepreneurs, all of them, 2 out of them are startups, 2 of them are Indian entrepreneurs, and one right next to me, Ellie Oldenburg, is a German entrepreneur here based out of Berlin. We'll start with her briefly. She is the Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Manager at Google. That is just a part-time job, but since 5 years, she's also so-called sidepreneur and founded Encourage Ventures, which we'll hear more about. This is really, really interesting because she's working a lot with particularly female entrepreneurs in Germany here based out of Hamburg.
Co-founded, I have to correct you.
A co-founder, okay, I'm sorry. To be precise, co-founder. We'll hear more about that later. Second on the list is Shikha Shah, joining us from Ahmedabad in Western India, founder and CEO of Altmat, focusing on agricultural waste to sustainable textile materials. So I'm really happy to have Shikha also with us. And last but not least, Soumya Tyagarajan, co-founder and CEO of Fiovia Tech GmbH, usually based out of Hamburg, but today joining us from Chennai. Fiovia Tech focus on digitalization, automation, transformation in transportation, usually mostly aviation and healthcare. We'll ask them one by one about their story. But first, a few numbers about what we are actually talking about when we're talking about this topic. And this, so I did some research before that, before the session, and I asked my colleagues as well. GINSEP is a program implemented by the German Startups Association based in Berlin. And they have recently, or every year, they publish the German Startup Monitor with lots of scientifically collected data on the German startup ecosystem. And they also published the Female Founders Monitor. So there's quite some information on Germany, on the German startup ecosystem and the situation also about female startups here. And of course, I tried to get some information about the situation in India. And the fact is that actually it is pretty difficult to get reliable information, which is due to different definitions of startups in the first place. In India, you have these vast numbers of, some say 35,000, some say 50,000 startups, some say even more around the entire country. In Germany, they say they're a little more modest. They say it depends on the definition. What is a startup? Maybe we have between 5,000 and 7,000 or 9,000 startups all across Germany. So there you can see it's really difficult to also compare numbers because it totally depends on the definition. But today we talk about startups in a sense, the most important characteristics of a startup. Is it really innovative? And particularly, is it scalable? So any startup is also, of course, a business or also entrepreneur, but not every entrepreneur or every entrepreneur is also a startup. So this might be something to think about for the ones that is not really familiar with startups or not working with startups on every day life. So I looked at the key results from the Female Founders Monitor and the German Startup Monitor, and also tried to get some responses or some answers to the same things from the Indian side, which was very, very difficult. But I can tell you already that, as I said, the situation does not look good, and in India also doesn't look much better than in Germany. And the key results are already not, well, they are maybe a little encouraging because it seems to be getting better, but they are far from being good. So there are 6 major findings that are there. In general, it says that the female founders, this is less than 20%, to precise 15.9% of all the founders. It increased a little in the latest Startup Monitor, so it's 70.7. So, well, yay, great. They're increasing in numbers, but still the share is less than 20%, so less than a fifth of all the startups. We heard the number from Consul General earlier. In India, on all the businesses, on all the enterprises, it's roughly also around 20%. Now, all the enterprise, not every enterprise is a startup. Depending on the number, I saw different numbers between also 10 and 15%, or 10 and 15 and 20%, but also definitely below 20%. But as I said, there is not one clear scientific number that we really have there, or one clear figure on this. So we know that only 20%, up to 20% are female founders in the first place. The second one is that they're majorly restricted to particular sectors, namely female teams are mostly active in the health sector and have a science background, scientific background. So they also are less, particularly, we'll talk to that also a little later, because Soumya in our discussion before that session also mentioned, particularly when it comes to high tech, the female founders are largely underrepresented. The third one is during fundraising, it's particularly difficult because there is a gender bias out there, both when it comes to angels so, and venture capitalists, VCs. So that makes it more difficult for them. And even when they fundraise, then the fundraising rounds are lower. So when it comes to 1 million or more of the rounds, only 5.2% of women founders have did a fundraising of more than 1 million versus almost 30% among men. So this is where we see really the disparity is unfortunately going even, or it's even farther apart there. So in India, I saw that the female founders that have at least one female founder in the founding team, there the number is also less than 6%, so similar than in Germany. But when it comes to only female founded teams, it's at 1.5%, which is among actually also limited survey done by Your Story that was done last year. Then maybe that another key finding also related maybe also to the fundraising is also that the business relevant networks among investors, corporates, but maybe also other startups are weaker among female founders, which might lead to lower fundraising round or also the difficulty of raising funds, but also of course in doing business, because access to, as we know, the corporates or other enablers are extremely important. Last but not least, the sixth finding is that the activities in fields of particularly the green economy or social entrepreneurship have a higher representation or is higher among female founders in general. So on the one hand, they focus more on healthcare that is a clear focus from the figures, but also green economy, social entrepreneurship, or have that angle to it. So these are the 6 findings. To sum up, we have lower numbers of general numbers of founders. We have a sector focus and a profile focus with more science background. There is gender bias, there are weaker networks, and the tendency towards social or sustainable businesses is even much more out there. So we see there's a lot to do. And with that monologue, I would also like to move on to the more interesting part, namely the dialogues, namely the session with our individual speakers. And I'll start with Shika in Ahmedabad. Now, roughly talk 5 to 10 minutes about her individual story before we move to a mixed discussion after we've heard individual stories. So, hi Shika, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you for having me, Julie.
So glad you could join. In fact, I was speaking with Shika last week and then also a few weeks back and heard her story already, and which is really brilliant. So I've heard your story, but I would like you to share what Outmat is doing. Maybe first you tell a little bit about yourself and your background, and then about Outmat before we jump into hearing more about your business journey.
Sure. Firstly, I would love to start by mentioning that I'm thrilled to be part of an event where 2 unique and thriving cultures, which is German and Indian, have been brought together to break the glass ceiling. And in that context, if I tell about how did I end up becoming an entrepreneur, as much as I can recall about my childhood, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I grew up watching my dad build his company from scratch in the space of circular economy, metals, and recycling, which is much before the circular economy became a buzzword. So I kind of grew up with those values around. It is also true that I am the first woman to work out of my extended family and not just family. But I would really give the credit pretty much to my mother, who taught me that values like consistency and ability to achieve goes way beyond gender, and that I can be what I can want to be, even if there is no precedence to it. So it's pretty much the right parenting that went into making sure that I have the right mindset. And then at the age of 15, I grew very fond of subjects like economics, psychology, and business. And this led me to spend most of my teenage debating between the question that what does the world need more? Does it need impact more, or does it need profit more? And the search of answer made me work across continents in structures like NGOs, filmmaking startup, deep tech startups, and also MNCs that were involved in mining and whatnot. So when I went around continents searching for the answer, I was doing this while also continuing my study. And interestingly, two of the projects at my class, one which was a part of my undergrad in India, was a lot about textile supply chain. And that kept exposing me to the fact that textile is highly pollutive. And also it came back to me as irony because I was somebody who stood for circular economy, but also love fashion, right? So how can you take away fashion and values, either of those things from a Gen Z? So it just kept coming back to me. And then interestingly, I moved to US to do my master's. And curiously, I was working on a project which had to do with industrial crops and agriculture. That introduced me to agriculture waste. So it was very unseeming, unplanned connecting of dots that happened between agriculture waste and textile pollution. It was a very strong hunch that there could probably be a new material that we can make from these agriculture waste, and it needs to be done in a developing country. So I came back home. One thing led to another. It has been 4 years now, and we've been able to do what we have been able to do at AltMat. Having said that, moving on to your next question, which is what is AltMat? What did it become into? So it's essentially an alternative materials company. I often get asked, what does alternative material mean? It's just like knowing that when you know that oil and gas is most pollutive out there, we as world needed and need alternative fuel. Pretty much the same applies to the world of materials. We have been discovering this since a decade now, that a lot of materials that we use out there, whether it is plastic or sometimes even polyester, so a lot of your dresses might actually be plastic without you knowing it, needs a change. So that means that you need an alternative material that needs to come into place. And one of the key technology, as I was mentioning, is pretty much connecting these dots. And now imagine a farmer who can grow this crop for oil seed or let's say fruit. And whatever is left out, like stem or leaves, is something that we can take into our technology and convert that into a cotton-like structure. And once it is a cotton-like structure, it can go and make your cars, it can go and make your carpets, your bags, your shoes, and clothing, a lot of those things without compromising on performance. It's not just the goodness part of it, but also making sure that it belongs to the world of performance that we are striving for. And yes, that's what we do at AltMat. We've been able to scale into building one of the world's biggest factory for it. And we are eyeing to replicate these production units on different continents.
Wonderful, wonderful, really, really impressive. And you set up that production in Ahmedabad in Gujarat itself?
Yes, it is. The first factory is right here in the hometown.
Wonderful, in your hometown. Yeah, great. So, and I wanted to ask you as well, if there's something like with regards to Germany also. You told me, you shared earlier that you have some contacts in Germany already. So talking about expanding business or getting some partners over here. Is there something particular that you're looking for?
Yes, we have been testing the German agriculture waste very closely. And it is also true that when it comes to European Union, it is looking at sustainable fashion and making things locally, which makes it a case for us to probably replicate and have a similar production unit right closer to the agriculture waste source or the textile manufacturing ecosystems out there. So we are eyeing in next 3 years to kind of build a factory where we can take the local waste from Germany and kind of put that out in the European ecosystem for usage as well, which kind of encourages both the local as well as circular economy production.
Okay, wonderful. So I guess if someone is here in the audience or listening to it, watching us online, I think you should reach out to Shika about if you're active in that space. you think you should collaborate with her. But looking at the numbers or the basically the gaps that we identified, or actually that I read out earlier. So looking at it, you support some of them. You are also active in an impact well, so that fits exactly that finding also from that report. But very interestingly, you said your environment, your family, as your father as a role model, but your mother in particular enabled that. How was it outside the family? You said you studied in the US and maybe also in where you studied in India doing your bachelor's. How was your environment there? Were you rather the exception as a female entrepreneur, or at least when you started before becoming an entrepreneur, were you already the only like entrepreneurial-minded women there, or was there like a large group of female entrepreneurs out there?
Yeah, I think you're right. This was definitely not the case of majority for most of my classmates who were females or colleagues who were females out there. However, what I also realize is that it doesn't mean that lack of other female participating would mean that my experience as a female entrepreneur was not fun or is not fun. In fact, I like to retell that narrative again and again to me that being a female entrepreneur is probably more of an opportunity, because what happens is that you will be placed into obnoxious or unfair situations every now and then. And I accept that some of those situations, like being asked whether, is this the company that is just run by you, or do you have your father or your brother or somebody is very annoying. But what if we look at it not as a speck of dot in a timeline, but in a continuum, as a process? What happens is you get opportunity to be more articulative, more aggressive, be more aware. You can sharpen your negotiation skill. You can sharpen your emotional intelligence, which a person with an average situation and hardship would not be able to do, right? So when I was around in that situation, where there were probably less number of females than what a male would have as colleagues or as people doing the similar thing, it still always felt rewarding. And I kept reminding me and the other friends out there that why don't we tell the narrative other way around? We need to tell the narrative in the right tone, and that could probably help a lot.
Love that.
Wonderful. It sounds really mature and sounds like really were determined to go really far. But well, since you said also it might be it was difficult that people were questioning. Okay, is there also another founder? Simply they're doubting that you could be the one doing everything by yourself. So how was that during fundraising, for example, or business development? Did you have the feeling that was like less trust and or maybe also respect that you had to, let's say, do the extra mile compared to some competitors or other entrepreneurs around you?
Absolutely. At the end of the day, every entrepreneur out there, whether it's tech involved or not involved, whether it's deep tech or soft tech, at the end of the day, you are a storyteller. You're actually having a vision and an execution strategy that you're saying we are going to achieve. But if there's a young woman going out there, there's a high chance that you won't be able to sell that perception, not because of something that you are doing, but because of the internal wiring of the person who is hearing your story, who's an audience to your story. And that kind of definitely sometimes also leads to distraction. Because instead of focusing on how do I make my story better, how do I make my execution strategy better, you go on to rant about it and feel that it's unfair and things like that. And that's probably another loophole that I feel that females need to be reminded of, that sometimes it's not your war, it's not even your battle, it's not something that you can do. But what you can make sure is you do not get distracted by something that's not in your control. Go out and make the effort, and also make sure that you don't have to win the world on day one. They might have a problem accepting your story and vision on day one, but what if you could tell that, hey, tomorrow I'm going to be back and I show you that we have achieved this part of the vision, right? So if you go back and you tell them, hey, I achieved part A, B, C of my vision, it actually gets converted into soft power. So something that was a soft loss is suddenly a soft power because that person was not expecting you to achieve. So I think it really helps when you kind of accept that, yes, there would be a perception that might not be in your favor and it might take time, but you can definitely use that perception to be in your favor stronger than a case that could be in the case of male, let's say.
Wow, so I see you really take it like a challenge, right? For you, that actually it is some hard task, but you really take up that challenge. Really, really impressive. One last question before I move to Soumya about maybe difference of being a female entrepreneur in Ahmedabad or in the US, and also I'm sure you traveled a lot to different startup regions for your business also within India. To what extent is it different in these different environments?
Interesting. I think at the core, most of the female founders, you know what, it's building that mindset or building that emotional intelligence or intellectual excellence is pretty much a process. So when you see a female founder out there, which is already a part of minority, as you said, it is accepted and given that if she's standing out there, she might have gone an extra mile out there. So most of them face a pretty similar perceptional issue that I was just talking about. So it's very similar in that ways. Probably one thing that changes from culture to culture and that kind of affects a lot is opportunity to fail. So if you come more towards the developing cities or developing countries, you would see that females will generally feel that they do not have a second chance or a third chance. And it is also given, it's also a statistic out there that most of the successful entrepreneurs were not successful the first time. They were the successful second time or third time. But hey, with female, you do not only not fund, not just financially, but also emotionally, you do not fund their failures. And on top of that, you kind of bag it with a very interesting opportunity cost. So you would say you would rather choose to not pivot a startup because if you do that, you can be a better wife or a better mother. Now, this tendency or this opportunity cost is probably less severe in a developed nation because they have come to terms with a more liberal world. But in the world where it is tough to finance, not only, again, I keep saying that it's not about just the money, it's about the emotional finance. It is tougher to probably operate in a developing or a less liberal economy.
Wonderful. So the figures suggest that it is still not that much better over here. And earlier, Ellie was next to me was nodding agreeing, but I'm not so sure if she agrees that over here the environment for female entrepreneurs is so much more better. So let's hear about that a little later first. But I mean, thank you, Chika, for now. I'll move on to Soumya and ask her about her own story. Maybe a little bit about your background. You are from Tamil Nadu in southern India as well, but actually you spent quite some time in Hamburg and are usually also based out of Hamburg and set up your GmbH, so your German company here directly before you set it up in India. So Soumya, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So first of all, I would like to thank you and the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for giving me this opportunity. It's a pleasure being here, and I was able to hear to what Shika spoke. Very interesting story. My experiences are completely opposite to what she has faced, be it family background, be it the path she chose, be it the entrepreneur way of leading her business forward. So my family background is my father was a bank manager. My mother is a homemaker and self-employed. So we have nothing to do with business or anything to deal with economy or in that aspect. So I have to do everything on my own, do a lot of trial and error. For me, entrepreneurship is all about trial and error. despite having meticulous plans, despite planning very well, things doesn't work out. So this is the reality. So I started learning everything on my own. I did a lot of trial and error, and I'm standing here after 2.5 years of operations. So basically, we deal with artificial intelligence and graphene material in Fovia Tech, and we specialize in building hybrid products. We combine these technologies together. So one example would be, we have a flexible graphene sensor, which will be inserted into the seats, passenger seats, or even wheelchairs, as we are focusing on dual markets. And this sensor provides us with a lot of data. So based on this data, what could we do? We are able to provide biometric information, we are able to provide comfort enhancement, and we are also able to provide various ergonomics instructions. So we have several product strategies, and our next strategy is also to deal with flexible sensors and flexible displays. So the flexible displays is also collaborating together with artificial intelligence-based UI, user interface. And then the third product strategy deals with graphene-based batteries and dealing with AI-based battery management systems. So a complete different background and complete different path I chose compared to Shika. So pretty much this is it.
Yeah, really impressive. And particularly, so my next question would be for you. I think people, and that might be one of the biases, when they see you, they would not expect that you are really into deep tech and video high tech, working on AI, and really seem to know your stuff. I mean, otherwise you wouldn't be successfully running your business since several years. So, what are your experience, or what were your experience of becoming an entrepreneur in that sense, and where did you realize that you want to become an entrepreneur?
Yeah. So, you know, I always keep talking about not by design, but by destiny. Germany was one among that. So I came to Germany as part of my DLR DART fellowship. I started my research R&D there, and I happened to meet my co-founder, Mr. Chandrakant Bote. He happens to have his PhD in AI. So we both collaborated together and started Fovia Tech. Since the beginning, I was like looking into various materials and various technologies. How could I like develop space technologies or aviation industry? So that is how I came up with graphene as a material and AI as a software, combining these together and getting and moving things forward. So my R&D base in Germany gave me a bit of experience on how to deal with digitalization and automation in various industries, and even for cross-industrial applications. So this is basically how we set up the company, and these are the reasons why I'm in Germany right now.
So everything learning by doing, and compared, so for you, your experience, let's say when you go to startup events or talk to potential investors or to corporates that you want to, or potential customers in general. So how was your experience, and in general, but then also between like your experience in Germany compared to India?
So in my mind, I'm an entrepreneur. I don't have differentiation between a male or a female. So I deal with people as they are. I have my basic instinct and intuition. So I follow that when I speak to them. So India and Germany are completely different from a cultural aspect. This is my learning. I have my Indian genes, Indian brain, but German training and German Funklish, so to say. So this is something which I've learned from the German culture and tradition. So I try to integrate and balance my both aspects or both faces when I'm dealing with the clients and my customers as well.
So do you feel that sometimes it's, well, not you, but the other person that you're talking to is that person's bias is the challenge? Because, well, let's say no matter how you know how strong you are or how good your product is, if there's a bias from another side, because they assume, or they think like, well, I'm not so sure about this deep tech solution, I'm not so sure if she knows what she's talking about, then, well, it doesn't matter how well you sell, it's nearly impossible. Have you faced these situations?
I wouldn't put this as a gender bias, but I would put this as a product competition, because there are a number of products out, and the key point is how we deal with the unique selling proposition, how we are able to differentiate between our product and the products that are already existing in the market. Because there are a number of sensors, why do they have to come to us? So what is the specific feature that we are able to enable to our sensors or our interfaces, or what kind of value proposition our customers have? So these are the things. It's all about sales, how we are able to sell our product. So if we are standing strong, then you're good to go.
Okay, so you try not to focus on the gender differences or biases that are out there. Last question before I move on to Ellie. Regarding the numbers that I said, all the biases, the low numbers of startup female founders, the sector focus, well, you are one exception there to that, right? No healthcare focus, or also like in the classical sense, social entrepreneur. So what is your take on these numbers? Why is that so?
So, as we have to accept who we are. And women, we are very good with crisis management. So when that comes, social entrepreneurship, it's a big word to, collaborate with. However, having said that, generally, we as women, we should evolve. As Friedrich Naumann, the foundation of Friedrich Naumann Foundation, he says that in order to truly become liberal, we have to free ourselves rather than looking into other sectors or other people who are surrounding us. So as women, we have to free ourselves before talking about biases. Right now, the basic obstacle in female entrepreneurship is women ourselves. So it's a revolutionary and an evolutionary process. I hope that changes in the future.
Wonderful. That sounded almost like some great, final vote of thanks kind of quote that you want to leave with the audience. Thank you so much for that, Soumya. Before I get back to you about the discussion part, I'll talk about the third female entrepreneur over here, who is Ellie Oldenburg here here physically at the event. And now, Ellie, we'll bring in the German perspective a little bit much more. First of all, really great that you are here. You have both the corporate side, so you work part-time at Google, but also as an entrepreneur yourself, particularly that field. Maybe you can share a little bit with us about your story, what you've been doing, and and a little bit about your background.
Yes. Thank you. It was so interesting to listen to both of you. Thank you for sharing. I learned already so much. And it was nice to see how women introduce themselves. I think it's a bit different. It's nice to hear a bit of like family background. You give the person a bit of context. So my context is I'm half Greek, half German by a Greek artist and a very flamboyant mother. So, and I carry both of that within me. But having that background, I was always told you have to do a career, you have to earn money, you have to be independent. And well, the easiest path, it seemed back then, I'm a Gen Y, so that's 15, 16 years ago, was, well, you study business and then you do a corporate career, and that you don't even think any further. So I wasn't ingrained the entrepreneurship in me at all. But in the past, so for the past 10 years and previously in other companies, for the past 10 years, I've been working for Google. So in the eye of the digitalization in marketing and sales in particular. So I don't have the mint background, the tech background. And as you said, just recently, I changed my job into diversity, equity, inclusion, which is super important in the corporate world, but also in society, because women in startups, we can scratch the startups. It's a breaking the glass ceiling. We have a problem about that everywhere. But a few years back, 5 years back, I decided to explore a different route again, the non-linearity in me, the two hearts pounding in my chest. And I decided, okay, corporate world is not everything. My German side is not everything, like the performance, the status, the career, Ellie. And so I decided to drill down in my time. I went on a 3-day basis. I did that most of the time in a job sharing model. And I started to explore other worlds, and being very digital on the one side, I wanted to do something more analog. First, I went on I did a lot of community work, charity work, and then I slowly and successively became a so-called sidepreneur. I only later found out that this word even existed. So I founded a little business Ich AG in German. You call
Okay.
it like a one-woman show.
Wow.
First, where I started coaching people, mentoring, and now it's been more of I'm having talks around the future of works. I do a lot of interviews. I'm started to write a book, and I consult companies and startups now to support them on their way to a new working model, to a new economic system, maybe even diverse view of the world, of the working world, but also how they cater to the markets. And I also have a little philosophical cafe. So you see, I do a lot of things just that I like, that where there's resonance, and that gave me the opportunity to wear a lot of hats in my life, which is where I'm training the VUCA skills to be volatile, uncertain, ambiguous, and VUCA complex system. So this agility to move between these worlds in the corporate world where everything is very formalized processes, but also very strong focus on scalability, on structures, and where you have a certain security, which is with all the advantages and disadvantages. And then in the free world, so to speak, where you can explore a lot, but you have obviously not the certainty what happens, and where I can grow into different topics. And one of the, to end on that note, one of the, in the past year, one of the topics has been co-founding, or let's say I have been a founding member with 59 other women. So it's, we have been a big network, Encourage Ventures, which is a network, an investor network to support diverse or female startups, support them with capital and support them with know-how, mentoring, coaching, expertise, network contacts, which is really important. And yeah, that has been an eye-opening experience for me, because I got to meet so many, not only founders, but also got to learn all the gaps that we've been already talking about from a very interesting angle. And yeah, so that's the whole perspective.
Super interesting, and I'm really looking forward to hear some more on basically on your work there. Mm-hmm. But let's take 2 steps back. What was the feedback in your environment when you were sharing, like, you know what, I'll reduce the hours, I'll work only 3 days, but I want to do my own thing. I want to try out something, want a different project. What was the feedback? Maybe from in your you know, simply in your environment, from mm-hmm. work side, but also maybe in your private circle, family, and further network.
It was the big question, why? It was a lot of big eyes and rolling, like, why are you even doing that? And you don't have a plan. And why is that? Who does it serve a benefit to? Like, and yeah, it still does. And I still get that feedback. But then on the other side, it feels more coherent to my personality, to what I can contribute with the talents and skills that I have. And also now, having done this for 5 years and been talking publicly about it, also gave me the mandate to shake up things a little bit, and within the corporate world, but mm-hmm. also from outside, which is because in those huge corporations, there's also, and I mean those, not only Google, but also those who I consult, there is a lot of those stigmas and these gaps that we talked about do exist in the regular corporate world just as much, and they have a lot of power. Let's not forget that, because startups is one thing. They want to grow to a big formation, but corporations have a lot of power, let alone in their multiplication factor, because mm-hmm. they have so many employees, huge markets, etc. So that's an interesting process, sometimes a little bit disillusioning, but still, I think, a different way to go. I believe more in non-linearity and multi-passionate, all mm-hmm. of that, that the working world of the future and the economy of the future, I think, at least for a sustainable economy with all the challenges ahead, needs anyways. Mm-hmm.
Okay, super interesting. Now looking at the numbers, also the mm-hmm. question to you, of course, and with regard to that experience that you have from all your founding members mm-hmm. Of your association. It's an mm-hmm. association, yes, right? Correct. So are the numbers, do the numbers really reflect their experiences as well, or what is your take on that?
Yes. They do. That's absolutely, that's what women, but also let's not forget other marginalized groups, so diverse groups
In
you can
Germany,
have in
okay.
Germany, especially experience as well. Well, one thing that I realized more now, having worked with them so closely, is that we have missing role models. So when I listen to both of you, for example, I feel like, okay, those are the stories more people have to hear, and not from the perspective of, well, we need more female stories out there. As you said, like have that stigma, we need more women. No, we need it from the perspective of this is how innovation grows in country. This is how we bring economy into a country, because women are known to even lead companies better, but also from a perspective of this is how we reflect that everyone belongs. This is a inclusion topic as well. So from this innovation perspective, economic perspective, I think we need much more role models. And I wasn't aware of that gap before looking into the startup scene, and from a female perspective, how much that is missing, that there is no voice and no visibility on that topic, because those 15%, that's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
I mean, and especially what was it, 4% below 1 million of investment? That's, I mean, we're talking about really small numbers here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, really interesting. My question would also be, when talking to your other founders there, and about their experiences with regard to the numbers that I've shared, are there also further topics? What are the other topics? Do you see diversity and female entrepreneurship? Well, it should be only focused on diversity in general, so that should be kind of integrated. So the female entrepreneurship should be part of the topic of diversity, or are there also other topics where you see the challenges go beyond the ones that I've outlined here?
So I think there are many structural challenges, especially now I can only talk about Germany, and I think that applies to Europe to a certain extent. So one is, for example, and you have been outlining this a bit, how to simplify the access to venture capital, really, because all those topics. So when I see that at the pitch nights as well, when startups pitch, apparently at regular VCs, men get completely different questions than females. And this is based on an unconscious bias. This is not because they don't like women or because they don't believe in the product, but they get more questions of more offensive questions, like tell us about the market more and the product and what you will serve. And women apparently get more of the question of how will you manage risk? How will you manage the costs, etc. So that doesn't help the stigma at all. And it doesn't help the courage to really go out there and feel that the idea is a great idea and that the country or the universe needs it. So we need to objectify that much more. And that is a process that obviously goes back to the representation of VC managing as well. So apparently, I think the number is maximum of 25% of VC managers are female also, meaning, and then on higher levels, you hardly find anyone anymore. So meaning this has to be balanced out. So representation matters, as we always say, also in government, but also in VC management. But also, how can we find or bring more objective decision-making structures into the decisions of who do we fund and who do we don't, especially if the funding comes from governments, right? At least I know in Germany, there's a huge fund, and who has objectified the decision-making process?
I see. So we're talking right about the mechanisms already. First to Soumya and Shika, do you agree with what Ellie said also about the feedback of the different kind of questions that you get? I took that you rather see it, both of you rather see it as a challenge for you if someone is really doubting, or if you feel that someone is doubting your idea, your solution there. But do you also feel that you get asked different questions when you do networking or selling your product, business development, fundraising?
So if I may answer.
Please, Soumya, go ahead. Sorry.
Yes. So basically, I wouldn't put it as biased, but there are stronger questions. So instead of asking about the markets, they ask about technical questions dealing with the technical documentations that we provide, rather than, if your product will be sold well, what is the USP, how are you differentiating yourself from the competitors. There are a lot of things that differentiate from men and women. So this is something which I faced personally. But other than that, every investor wants to know what is the ROI, what is the return of investment. So that's the basic or selling point. If you have it well, then it's good to go. Nevertheless, indeed, female entrepreneurs have to face few hard questions compared to what men do.
Shika, anything you can add to that?
Yeah, I think I agree with what was mentioned, right? So for example, if I go ahead and tell in my presentation that we're super sure about our supply chain, they will hear it. But in the question, they would, how sure are you about your supply chain? Well, I just mentioned that I'm super sure. I think initially it was daunting, but probably the way that I take on it now is answering that question as if it was really a very easy question to ask. So if somebody asks me that 100%, right, that is it. Probably I don't need to explain them. So when you do that with first two questions, they get wiser with their questions and you reach the point faster. So yes, the first two questions might be weird, but you need to handle it in a right stride and then you get to the right questions.
Wonderful. Now,
but Shika brings also a lot of, and both of you, a lot of self-esteem with that, which is great. But many girls are still not raised in that way, right? To say, okay, I'll fake it until I make it, and it's 100%. So I think that's, you bring both of that, and I bring that to a certain extent as well. But I see that also in the education system, it goes back a long way. How do we support a general mindset of entrepreneurialism, of risk, taking risks and all of that, and that is typically more on the male side, or more trusted more on that side.
I see. So yeah, Shika, you want to add something on that?
Yes, absolutely.
Please.
I think so this is not my first company. The reason I totally believe my first company didn't work out was not being able to understand that people will try to play around with your self-esteem, not by saying you in a straightforward way that you're not up to mark in those words, but those will come in very hidden signals.
Yes.
If you do not keep changing that narrative in your head. So for example, I could go ahead and tell my story in a way that I come from a family where there was no women who worked. We probably I've seen times in my childhood where we would have to take the veils because that's a sign of respect to the male. So you take a veil, right? But probably what makes sense is telling that story in a way that I grew up in the time when the veil became so irrelevant that you could do everything that you want to do. So I witnessed the change. That is pretty much something that I learned from the start of that field, that if you are being told that you do not have the right to the equity in the company more than the male has, in spite of you building it equally, you might want to have the self-esteem to say that probably this is not the company for me at all. Right? So probably having that ability, and there's no way to learn it without practicing it.
Sure.
So you horribly fail. You would probably dent your mental health, but then you'll bounce back. And when you bounce back, your self-esteem then would definitely have more resilience than it could have in an average situation. So retelling that narrative again and again to yourself till you build that resilience is super important.
So you have to be very confident and also persistent, I take it.
And I think something you said, you mentioned it twice, emotional intelligence builds, for example, that resilience is also not part of the structures, neither in education nor in big corporations, by the way. So building that, and this is also a core competencies of the future of work, to bring that into the empathy and the emotional intelligence into processes, because we will change heads more, things will get more complex, more VUCA, as I said. So I think emotional intelligence plays a huge role in that.
Yeah, interesting. So let's talk a little about the mechanisms. What is really needed? What is really needed to build something up, or what kind of mechanism are there? First of all, that you've experienced as an environment. Jiga mentioned earlier it was more family, Somya, you met your co-founder in Germany, so brought that idea and built everything then from scratch. So what are the mechanisms that helped you first, but then also what are maybe, and when I talk about mechanisms, I mean networks, I mean programs, organizations, groups, you name it. So first that helped you, but then also that mechanisms that you would have wished that were there when you were starting up, or you want to be there also for other female entrepreneurs or future female entrepreneurs. Who would like to start with that? Somya.
So basically, I had a lot of support mechanism from my family. My mother, she is a self-employed, and at the same time, she was also our investor, a pre-seed investor. So basically, I built the foundation of our company through the money which was invested by my mother. And my other huge and immense support is by my boyfriend, Sanchit. So, whenever I come back home, I get to speak to someone about what happened back at work, the challenges, everyday, day-to-day operations, what is happening, what is the problem, what are we facing financially, the struggles. So family is a immense and huge support mechanism that every entrepreneur needs. It's not just a female or a male entrepreneur. And apart from that, being in Germany, IFB is a huge support for startups, because IFB deals with a lot of funding and how do we deal with fundraisings and stuff. So their support was immense. Other than that, Hamburg Invest, OAB were also providing us with various networks. Especially Lee and Veronica from Hamburg Invest were helping us a lot from the beginning, since the scratch and since the foundation of our company. And apart from these, we have other friends and families. So these are the support mechanisms which any entrepreneur should have, not just me.
Of course, great to hear you also had from a very personal, well, in your personal environment, your family and friends also the support, and then also from the German side when setting it up, that you had that actually these mechanisms, these organizations really helped you. So it's really good to have that feedback, to hear that from you from that side. Were there anything really female entrepreneur related initiatives that you benefited from, or that you would have wanted to be there?
Unfortunately, I never had such organizations approaching me, or I never approached it. My thought process was already aligned, or always aligned towards, stability, and not to see it as male or female. Indeed, I've accepted the fact, I realized what it is, but fortunately, I was having help from all over, and not just female or male.
Okay, and something like Encouraging Ventures, which focuses on exactly female entrepreneurs and exchange of experiences and contacts, network, and how to do it. So would that have been something, well, you said like you were rather focusing on the product and everything, but would that have been something that would have helped you?
One interesting fact is our first investor, he is a 70-year-old male who's a wheelchair, who sits in a wheelchair. So, that's how my journey started. So it's very hard to differentiate between a male or a female VCs or investor, but even I have both female and male investors. But indeed, the ratio is, it has to balance.
It has to balance. I see. Jiga, what is your take on that? What were we heard about your family, there was lots of support there. But also from other organizations or other like initiatives in your environment?
Yeah, I think I would start with the point that it is given that merit precedes everything. Like, you really need to be meritorious. So it is very much required that you keep going back to yourself and make sure that are you meritorious enough to ask for or to dream for what you're dreaming. And maybe the answer is no. So then the thing is that you go back and say that what is the growth rate that I can get at that point to probably be, be at what I want to be, right? So it probably starts at the question of self-awareness. And when you kind of start doing that, you realize what are your weak points. For a few, if that self-esteem that is commonly missing in women is in place, then it might be of lesser point to find more support in that arena. But then you can also make sure that maybe not exactly self-esteem, but I feel more fulfilled when I hear other females speak of their stories. I learn of more tactics of how to deal with what is going to be thrown at me in the real world out there. So I would like to hear the other females speak their story, right? So it's probably kind of sitting back and assess that what is exactly that you are lacking and where exactly would you need support. In my case, things that worked out was probably having friends, irrespective of the gender, who were either a step ahead of me or a step behind me. When I interacted with these two kinds of friends, it kind of helped me understand that what I have grown from and where am I trying to lead. So you can probably take cues and inspiration and build your own supporting ecosystem. Overall, I do think that sense of community really, really helps. I think 4 years ago, when I came back after my post-graduation out here, saying that, no, I don't want to take that amazing job in US and probably be back in here, there was chaos. My family didn't see anybody move out at all. And they were asking them, well, we have everything that you need. Right? You could really have a very luxurious life. What are you asking for? Doesn't make sense. And in generally, this sort of family, it's more of an extended family. You come to here in India, you realize that I grew up in joint family having 15 people, meaning 15 opinions, but also 15 people to help me, right? So you kind of need to keep going and reassess where your roots are, what exactly do you lack, and only touch upon those points and kind of make a support system which suits your need. There cannot be anything like an ideal support system in absence of understanding what your needs are. So yeah, irrespective of gender, go out there, assess what you need, and put in efforts to build that support system. Nobody is going to serve you that.
Okay. So no structural support systems actually that you would have wanted to be there, or that you actually required. Ellie, what is your take on that?
Well, actually, I love the idea. You had a little bit of structural in there. What resonates with me is the saying, it takes a village to raise a child. So I guess it takes a village also to raise a startup or a company or a vision of any kind. And sometimes that's the super inner circle of a close family, and sometimes it's a village and more a network of people who support you, who believe in you. One number that comes up, I'm not sure if it was of the Female Founder Monitor of 2020 or 2019, at least for Germany, that a big share, I think the majority of startups of the small startups that are being built by females, a big share of those are funded by family members. And it's with males, it's in contrary, it's a very little share that support where the family supports. It also shows you a bit of, okay, let's first pitch in the safe space of a family or someone who I know who has a lot of investment capability. So I think that speaks for itself. But from a structural point of view, I would just add, and that is a German and European topic for sure. I'm not sure about India. We need a radical decrease of bureaucracy. That for sure is something that is in the way a lot. We have formulated as Encourage Ventures a few demands publicly and to the government. And one of that is, for example, it should be possible to found a company, not only a startup, within 24 hours. Currently, it's between 35 and 75 days. and it's completely offline and analog. And I think they have a example in our paper of Estonia, where it's possible in 24 hours and it's completely online, and everyone from the Chamber of Commerce to the Treasury Department and everyone who needs access, so to speak, from a governmental point of view, can view everything online as well. So this is something we need to get into the 21st century rapidly more. And then I think many things we talked about, the objectified process to get, or objectified and simplified process to get better capita that supports everyone, not only females, it supports everyone. And the entire, the MINT topics, the mindset, entrepreneurial, digitalization, sustainability, all of that, I think have to become more ingrained into the whole education system. And that also brings in emotional intelligence and all of that, that brings this mindset of into an economy ultimately. If I can do risky things, I can bring my vision to the table and develop something. And if I fail, that's okay. So all of that we need to teach more, not as a single subject, but something cross-functional around a desperately needed change of the education system anyway. So I think those would be structural levers.
Great. So other structural. So you mentioned that of course the mindset is one thing, but when it comes to structural, you usually, Shika and Soumya, you said usually it was the environment, your family and friends that you really benefited from it. Basically, they enabled you to be successful and support you. So would you say in general to all three of you that we require, let's say, some female-friendly investors, or that we put something like particularly for female founders, for female entrepreneurs out there? Or is it just in general, well, just the ease of doing business that we need to increase to make it easier to do business, to found a company and to access networks and access to corporates, investors, and so forth? So do we need something dedicatedly to encourage really female entrepreneurs on a structure, on a government side? Who wants to start?
I have a clear reply.
Ellie, go ahead.
Well, my answer has to be yes, at least now where we are in time. I hope in 20 to 30 years this is not necessary anymore. But as of right now, because of the structural problems we have, we need, and this is the mission statement of Encourage Ventures, we need a network of women that support women, that have the positive narrative that we have been talking about, also that bring it out there. So who not only give you money and then say, okay, now play the game on the same structural problems, but who support you along the entire way. We have fantastic workshops from the ideation process. So sometimes you don't have to only come to a pitch night where you feel like, okay, I have the perfect business model, etc. No, there is the safe space. We can come, I have an idea. Can somebody help me with your expertise, network contacts to grow that idea to final business IPO stage even. So, and that on an eye level, not as if we tell you how it's done. No, we have a network of people who support you. Let's carve this out together. And I think this is needed in the world anyways, that we do more together on an eye level, but I think what female founders and diverse teams in general need more to feel more empowered to bring innovation to a country.
First the structural change, and then of course also then that would be changing the mindset.
I think
right?
So I see it as a lever, not as the final solution, but as a lever to a new way of working and entrepreneurial mindset.
Okay. Shika, maybe you want to continue also. What do you think? Something of the support mechanisms that you would recommend that we need from a private side or from a government side, or should that be structured, or should we not focus on some dedicated female-friendly investors or networks?
So. My understanding, we have a lot of investors or lead investors who are female, but when it comes to female investors, the statistically speaking, the ratio is very less. We have fund managers or VCs who
take care of the investment management, they are women. But the lead investors are not women. First, that ratio has to increase rather than setting up a separate fund just focusing on women. So technically speaking, when this increases, there is an obvious point of expanding into female entrepreneurship and female investments.
Representation.
So that is the key changing area, at least in my perspective.
Absolutely. So it is also general that mindset. Shika, what do you have to add to that?
Absolutely. Do we need any change? Yes, there is something wrong out there. We do need a structural change. And probably I would like us to imagine it this way. Let's say if there is literally an actual ceiling out there, like if there's an actual glass ceiling out there and we have to break this. So in that case, logically, you need two things. So let's say two buckets. One is structures and mechanism to make that ceiling weak, which is structural changes, societal changes. Let's not have that ceiling. And the other thing is giving more power to the feast, I would say to the lady who's trying to break that ceiling, right? So probably if anything that we try to do has an answer that yes, if we do this, it's either going to make the glass ceiling weak or it's going to make that lady stronger, we need that change. It's probably a last question that you ask before applying a policy and a yes or a no. And if we go by that logic, it also becomes very easy to judge that. Let's say if the question was, how do you make this lady stronger? Well, you make her meritorious enough. And in terms of meritorious, not just the intellectual ability, but all the emotional ability that is required, right? So that probably becomes the first point in contact. The second is funds. It goes without saying that when you have weight in your pocket, you can actually, whatever you speak gets more validated just by the fact that you have more weight in your pocket, right? So it probably is the fund that is needed. And these are the two things that can make that feast, kind of that lady stronger, and then make the glass ceiling weaker. We need to challenge the perception. If there is a wrong question being asked, the other judge in the panel should probably get up and say that, well, I would like to ask the other side of the question, right? So it's probably everybody trying to make sure that perception, that ceiling is no more there, or it's way weak, and most of us will be able to break it.
Great, wonderful. Some encouraging words here. As we're coming to an end, please feel free to raise your hands if you have any questions here on site or also online. Submit your questions there in the Q&A. Then Frank will also come on stage now and ask some questions. But now, before we go over to the questions, would like to ask you for one message from each of you to female founders of future potential female founders out there. What is the message, the one single message in 1, 2, or 3 lines that you want to communicate to them? Who wants to go first? Ellie? Or you want to think about it?
Well, I think most of it has been said. It's about, at the end of the day, it's about your passion to change something in the world and to bring that innovation out there. And I think it needs a lot of courage, and turn to the people that give you that courage, that mental, emotional stability, and to support you in that. And with that, a little bit of failure here and there it's fine. It's fine. It will be just a little obstacle, and then, okay, I'll move on. So that strength, I think, is out there. And never forget, you do not only do that for a product or a market. It's about the structural change that is happening, and it giving innovational power to the country you serve to. At the end of the day.
Interesting. That is also something that in general and it needs to be changed in the mindset in Germany, that failing is considered really, really bad. Whereas I feel that from my work that in India, it's much more common, it's much more accepted also to fail and try something new. So more that, let's say, the American mindset of also starting something. So that also goes in line with that. Really interesting. Shika, you want to go next?
Sure. I would say when it comes to entrepreneurship, you will have a lot of battles to fight before you win the war. And it is true that if you are a woman, especially, and more so if you're a younger woman, you will have a couple of more battles to fight before you win the war. The trick is that you pick the right battles. Some of them are not yours to fight. So make sure that your energy is channelized in the right direction. It is important to be focused. There will be unfairness out there, but if you let that unfairness distract you, then you are kind of getting distracted from the battles that matter more than the others. So be very wise in picking the battles that are needed to win the war, and you'll make it.
Wonderful. I really like that. I really like that. Very, very encouraging words there. Soumya.
So in my perspective, fear and risk-taking factors are very, very low for women. So women have to change their perspectives about this. And it's basically an evolutionary process. We need time to change, and it's already there. So a symbiotic relationship has to form between, VCs or investors or founders, regardless of male or female entrepreneurship. So once that is there, then we are good to go and things can move forward.
Wonderful, amazing. I really like all the three messages. Now let's move to the question. I see, or actually I saw some question was also here displayed on the monitor, but it disappeared now. Frank, are you joining us on stage here to read out some of the questions that were asked?
Yes, I'm joining you here on the stage. Julian so very generously invited the audience to ask questions. We have a bit of an issue though. Our very generous host needs the room because the next technicians move in today evening to prepare for tomorrow morning for the next events. So we unfortunately do not have time really for a question. I mean, I could take a question or two from the audience, but otherwise I would suggest we do that over the snacks and the Indian beer that we have here, at least for the people who have joined us here at the Consulate General. Wonderful. I think we exceeded the time anyways with our discussion, and which was very, very lively. So I really enjoyed that part. So thank you very much, Shika. Thank you very much, Soumya, and also Ellie. I found it really, really insightful and inspiring also to hear all these encouraging words and stories and recommendations. So I'm really taking a lot home from here. Yeah, it was a super interesting discussion, and of course I would have wanted it to end so that we have time for questions, but I wanted it to go on because you really were in a flow, and I could feel how it's at my neurons firing. I myself have a lot of questions, which I will ask over a glass of Kingfisher maybe. With that, we are coming to the end, and that leaves me with the vote of thanks. This is a hybrid event, and we had many partners, we had many service providers and vendors. There's a long list of people and organizations I have to thank. But I will only thank selected people and organizations. So in the name of the Naumann Foundation, and also in the name of the head of the regional office South Asia, Dr. Carsten Klein, who couldn't be here today evening, I'm filling in for him. I would like to thank, first of all, the Consulate General of India here in Frankfurt, and especially Hamburg. Hamburg, Frankfurt, all the same. And especially the Consul General, Mr. Sorry for the name, Ruongul. I'd like to thank the Senate Chancellery of the city of Hamburg, not only for this event, but really for putting together this wonderful initiative, the India Week Hamburg, which takes place every 2 years. I would like to thank the partners specifically for this event. This is the OAB, the German Asia Pacific Business Association here in Hamburg, and then GINSEP, represented by Julian, the German Indian Startup Exchange Program based in Berlin. And I'd like to, of course, thank our panelists, Shika Shah of Altmat, Soumya Thiagarajan, and I believe you went to a business center in Chennai to have good internet connection and a quiet setup. And Chennai, maybe you followed the news, was devastated by floods in the last couple of days. So she literally came through flood and high water to be with us today evening. I'd like to thank Ellie Oldenburg I don't even know what I should say. Of Google is written here, but you're Ellie Oldenburg of Google, of Encourage Ventures, various. And of course, our moderator, Julian Six.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank you, our audience, for being with us here today evening in person. And I'd like to thank the many vendors who helped us, supported us in putting together this event. I'd like to mention one vendor, though, who was really supportive and with us day and night, every second, the event management company Tauleo, and their founder, also an entrepreneur who is here with us today, Mr. Lucas. They were the ones who brought together all these moving parts. We counted at some point, and we had altogether a list of 20 organizations and service providers and vendors that we were working with for something that looks like a small event. Last but certainly not least, this is an event on women startups. We had wonderful women with us in the panel today. And now I stand here to basically say the vote of thanks in the name of the Naumann Foundation. However, the driving force behind this event was also a wonderful woman, and I'm looking around. Oh, there she is, Katharina Janotta, and I would like her to come to the stage so that you all have at least seen her. With that, we close the event. So Katharina, give a hand to Katharina. It was really all her work. And with that, I thank you all. We have snacks and drinks in the back. Please do help yourselves, interact with the one speaker who is here, the moderator, with us, be with us for a short moment still. And for the speakers here, and also maybe the colleagues from our Hamburg office who supported us, we just quickly stay here for a photo. Thank you very much and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you to India.